This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 129. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where I talk about my painting, modeling, and wargame experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 YouTube videos a week. How could I possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, there was a whole bunch of new releases, a surprise best model of 2023 possibly, and a really cool tank that no one's allowed to take in game. But first, us wargamers know all about squares, our boards are square, our rule books are square, and if you want a website, there's only one place to go, and that is Squarespace. Squarespace allows anyone to break into website design with easy-to-use features and professional support from start to finish. Looking through the dozens of award-winning templates on offer, you can customize the look and design of your website with ease. And with Squarespace's patented Fluid Engine system, it's a breeze to design a website you can truly call your own. Or your online storefront. Whether your services are physical, digital, or service-based, selling your wares has never been easier with Squarespace. Squarespace offers a free trial for you to dip your feet into and test the waters. When you're ready to dive in headfirst, you can use our link in the description below or type in squarespace.com/EonsOfBattle to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. First things first, let's look at the surprise smash hit, which has the potential to be best model of 2023, according to some people. A new model for the Bretonnians, Lady Alyssa Dutchard, the prophet of the Lady of the Lake. So there's 2 ladies. There's Lady on a Horse and Lady in the Lake. This is a really cool miniature. I would say that this is a perfect miniature, meaning that it's everything that it is and it's nothing that it's not. If you want a lady on a horse, this is a lady on a horse. It doesn't get me overly excited, but I do see why it is an absolutely fantastic mini. It really looks nice. It really looks like it would be an awful lot of fun to paint. Doesn't necessarily get me excited about Old World. I don't really understand Old World. I mean, Warhammer Fantasy died, but then it got resurrected. It got resurrected too soon, I feel like. They didn't wait long enough for it to be like a truly honored and remembered classic. It almost feels like they got rid of it and then they're like, oops, we maybe shouldn't have done that. Let's just bring it back. This is a really, really cool miniature. I do like the Bretonnians. Games Workshop has been coming out with a new Bretonnian army, the Cities of Sigmar. And I really, really like those miniatures, but they just don't quite feel right to me. They don't feel like a really ragtag group of kind of survivors doing all they can to push back against the forces of chaos. They feel like a really well-organized militia. Like almost like an Imperial or evil society, a little bit more 40K than Age of Sigmar, where they all have really, really good-looking outfits. Everything is perfect. They're kind of the stormtroopers of Age of Sigmar, where everything is absolutely perfect. Their weapons are cool. Their armor is all... It's not individual, they all are wearing the exact same armor, the exact same super gigantic helmet with very Baroque ornamentation. I don't know, I feel like it's just not... I would want more of a gene stealery cult, more of a ragtag group of guys who are just... They're all just kind of wearing robes and rags, but they got it where it counts. They got the gumption to take on the forces of chaos. And you know what? The forces I just described actually would look really good led by Lady on a Horse. I really appreciate this model for being a big departure from typical Games Workshop fashion because it's not overly flashy, it's not super embellished, it's just a really, really good lady on a horse. And it proves that they are able to do stuff like this. If a lot of Warhammer Fantasy or Old World miniatures are kind of like this, I might be a little bit more inclined to play it, although I really like Age of Sigmar. So it's hard to believe that I'm gonna like Age of Sigmar and then also wanna play another game that's very much like Age of Sigmar with some of the same characters and models. And I also really like Conquest, Last Argument of Kings, also known as Clack. It's also a really fun rank and flank game. And you didn't hear this from me, but I might be getting into A Song of Ice and Fire. It's possible that I've even played a few games and it's kind of interesting. So there's good Old World is a little bit far down on my list of war games to try out, but I really do appreciate Lady on a Horse. There's a new Blood Bowl team. This is the first Blood Bowl team in a long time, I think. I think the last one was maybe the Amazons early this year, or maybe very late last year. I really like the Amazon team. They were super cool. And these guys are also super cool, just in time for kind of the fall months. They're kind of like October Halloween-y. They're very, very silly models. I kind of dig them for that. There's some really, really fun stuff here. It's very silly, like very silly. They are the perfect like combination of classic Dracula vampires and football players. I also really like it when they have one member of the team who's just not a person, or like there's like a bunch of normal human players and then there's like an ogre or a troll or a kind of a robot automaton creature. It just adds so much fun. I purchased the first edition of Blood Bowl. I guess it was probably the second edition of Blood Bowl. And it looks like such a fun game. Never gotten a chance to play it. And now we're in Blood Bowl second edition, or the second iteration of current Blood Bowl. So I don't know if any of those models are still usable right now. Certainly the rule book isn't. But man, there's just some fun details. I wonder if the designers at Games Workshop, I wonder if every now and then they're like, all right, your job is to make the new Space Marine Desolation Squad. And you spend months and months designing the perfect Nerf Super Soaker to go on these Space Marines. But then after that, they're like, we know you don't want to do the Desolation Marines. Nobody wants to do the Desolation Marines. But afterwards, we're gonna give you a Blood Bowl team. And that would be the perfect like carrot on a stick to keep me going, because man, do they really let themselves have a ton of fun on the little bespoke game, the boxed games. Blood Bowl, Necromunda, Warcry, Underpants. I feel like these are the games that really lead to some interesting models. 40K and Age of Sigmar models are interesting, but they usually have to be massed together. You kind of have to see the whole picture of the entire force to have everything really kind of look the part and really kind of spark the imagination. Where I feel like a lot of these other game miniatures, they kind of stand alone. They kind of just would look good on the shelf or on your coffee table or in a little display case on your desk at work to try to just keep you entertained. And speaking of interesting minis, there are some new Slaanesh miniatures. Unfortunately, not for Warhammer 40K, for Warhammer Underpants, or Underworld as some people call it, which is set in the Age of Sigmar universe. And man, these are some Slaaneshi miniatures. I've always had a soft spot for the Demonettes. I like the Juan Diaz Demonettes. I like the current Demonettes. I think that there's something to it, and I really like what Age of Sigmar has been doing with Slaanesh, where they're just kind of grotesque, but not in the Nurgle way of being grotesque. Like, they're grotesquely pretty, which is an interesting way to do it, and I really love these miniatures. Like, I almost want to get them and just try to do a Slaaneshi Demons army, and try to 40K it, make it a little bit more grimdark and science fiction-y. But man, these are some unbelievably gorgeous miniatures. It was definitely kind of a bait and switch with the Nova Open reveals where they showed off Fulgrim, but not for 40K, for 30K. And it was such a tease moment, because for just a minute, I saw it all. I saw Slaanesh is finally coming to 40K. All 4 Chaos Gods are gonna be beautifully represented on the tabletop. It's gonna be so cool. Nope, there's still Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and there's like a 4th one, but nobody ever hears about it. Literally, there's only one 40K Slaanesh miniature, and that is the Glamrock Noise Marine, the one little offshoot model that is really, really cool. But you can't even get a squad of them. You can just get one single miniature. It's a little bit sad. I don't know when Games Workshop is finally gonna get the courage to give Slaanesh a try. And I know it's hard. They've really written themselves into a corner with Slaanesh, because Slaanesh is the god of excess. And that is really hard to show off, because really all of the other Chaos Gods have kind of taken all of the design elements. Like, you know, Tzeentch has extra arms, extra tentacles, extra teeth. Isn't that a little excessy? All of the Nurgle guys are fat. Isn't that gluttony? Isn't gluttony a form of like excess? You know, excess rage and violence. Like, it all kind of feels like they're all taking a little bit from Slaanesh, and they're not leaving anything behind. So I get why it's really hard to come up with a strong design philosophy for Slaanesh that doesn't step on the toes of any of the other Chaos Gods. But man, I want Games Workshop to try, because if this is the level of quality they can do with Slaanesh miniatures, you know, give some of them a Warp Flamer or a Stub Gun and just send them off to 40K, because it would be so, so cool. Also, this box comes with Idoneth Deepkin. It's a new starter kit for Underpants, and it looks cool. I like the Idoneth Deepkin. in the lore. In the actual miniatures, they look a little bit too much to me like the decorations that you see at the pet store that you put inside of your fish tank. Like, it almost looks like the item that's Deepkin behind them should be SpongeBob's pineapple. They kind of have, they have kind of a fish tank vibe where they're supposed to be really evil, monstrous, like little elf monster demons. Like, they're really nasty. They're really nasty creatures, but they look very just noble and nice in the models. Maybe it's just the Games Workshop paint style. Maybe if you just threw a whole bunch of streaking grime on them, it would just fix it all overnight. But man, those demonettes, those weird demonettes, I love them. And that's certainly not the only thing that has come to Age of Sigmar, because there's some new orcs. I often forget that there's orcs in Age of Sigmar because they just came out with the Cruel Boys, which are also orcs, but they're a different kind of orc. And they unfortunately are actually a different army. Like 40K came out with the Beastnaga Boys, which are very different feeling orcs, but they're in the same army. You can take them together, no problems, where Age of Sigmar has kind of separated the orcs into different armies and different categories, but the orcs are cool. I really like the giant orc dragon that kind of looks like a cabbage, and it's almost the same size as a cabbage. It's a really cool miniature. And the Iron Jaws. As soon as I saw these guys, I just thought they would be such perfect proxies for 40K. Orcs in Mega Armor are looking really good this edition. It looks like they're really worth taking because they actually have some good anti-armor, which is kind of lacking in the rest of the Orc Codex. But the current Mega Knobs kit is kind of looks like little kid cardboard armor, which is definitely a look and is very appropriate for Warhammer 40K orcs, but I feel like these guys, depending on their size, presumably they're pretty enormous, these guys would look really good as Mega Knobs. Just strap on just a couple of guns and maybe change those flails to buzzsaws. These would make some really cool orcs. I've got my Mad Max orcs, and also Mad Max orcs, you know, they wouldn't have, power armor would look out of place in the world of Mad Max, but just some really roided up orcs carrying flails that are like that end in chainsaws or buzzsaws, that would feel very Mad Max. These are just really cool miniatures. And the Iron Jaws don't often get stuff for Age of Sigmar. I don't know, Age of Sigmar is on a very different release schedule than Warhammer 40K, but it seems like they're kind of coming together in the style of these releases where a faction will get a whole bunch of stuff in a codex as opposed to kind of dripping things here and there somewhat randomly, which is kind of what we've all been used to. But I think Games Workshop's trying to fix their release schedule into something that makes a little bit more sense, and so that they can focus on one army at a time and kind of really give it a whole bunch of stuff and get people excited for it. But speaking of getting people really excited for things, one thing that I wasn't expecting is the Deredeo Dreadnought to return in plastic, which literally I just built and painted one of these things, and literally Games Workshop just ripped it from me, taking it out of the Space Marine Index before I even had the chance to ever put it on the tabletop. The Deredeo Dreadnought is a dreadnought. I absolutely adore it, and it is finally available in plastic. The resin one was fine, and it was very expensive for being fine. It did have flaws. It had some mold slippage. It had a rivet that didn't appear in the resin, and I had to kind of resculpt it on with a little tiny Martha Stewart glass bead, which would have been fine if it wasn't a really expensive miniature. Hopefully the plastic Deredeo will be available for a much smaller price, or at least less money and much better quality. I can be fine with. It's the really expensive and poor quality resin that really kind of gets under my skin. But I think the Deredeo Dreadnoughts could actually still have a place in Warhammer 40K, and that is as a stand-in for the Ballistus Dreadnought. The Ballistus Dreadnought is a new Dreadnought for 40K. It is the just gun version of the Redemptor Dreadnought, and it looks a little bit off. I think the Redemptor Dreadnought, because it actually has like elbows and knees, it looks more of like a brawler Dreadnought that could really get into a fight. But when you have the Ballistus Dreadnought, just aren't guns bolted to the sides, but he's still got knees to walk around with, it just looks a little bit funny. Where I think the Deredeo, and they're about the same size. The Deredeo is a little bit smaller, but with the giant missile pod on top, they're pretty comparable in size. I actually think the Deredeo Dreadnought would be a really fun proxy as the Ballistus Dreadnought. And that might be how I have to play it to get it on the tabletop, because I really like it. And of course, I could always just grab the Legends of the Heresy rules and use them out of the index. And that would be fine, but for competitive play, and for playing against Sean, I really want to see the Deredeo Dreadnought on the tabletop. I just want to say Deredeo Dreadnought, because it's a really fun word to say, Deredeo. And it looks like a gunboat of a walker, where the Ballistus Dreadnought is just the Redemptor Dreadnought with guns bolted to the side of it, which looked really good when box knots were these weird tripod, kind of heavy machinery, like pieces of equipment. They don't look like people. They look like these weird robots, where the new Redemptor Dreadnought does look a lot more like a person, which makes the Redemptor and the Brutalis look really good. But I think it's really lacking when it comes to the Ballistus, so I'm excited to see the Deredeo available in plastic once again. Unfortunately, freshly removed from Warhammer 40k, but I think it still has a place. But really the thing that I am most excited for this week is the upcoming pre-orders, because that means Kill Team. There's no brand spanking new Kill Team, but in a way there is, because the new Heroes, Space Marine Heroes Series 4 is coming out. Once again, it is Space Marines, but it is Primaris Space Marines, and it is actually going to feature Kill Team rules. And to purchase a box of these Space Marine Heroes, which does a little bit defeat the purpose, because they're kind of meant to be fun blind bags that you purchase like at the counter at the Warhammer store or at your friendly local game store, but you can also just buy the set, and the price has been announced, and it is 64 bucks. 64 bucks for 8 Marines is actually not that bad. I mean, it's bad. It's bad if you compare it to almost anything else besides Games Workshop products, but for Games Workshop products, it's a good number of Space Marines, and all 8 of those Space Marines are gonna come with a little data card for use in Kill Team, so you can make a new Space Marine Kill Team. And I really like Space Marines and Kill Team. I loved the old index rules. I recently finished an Intercession Kill Team that you guys might see in the very near future, and I've kind of been itching to paint more Space Marines in not Black Templar. I absolutely love Black Templar, but I'm not gonna say no to an opportunity to paint something else. And I've really been in the mood for some Flesh Terrors. Just a really cool offshoot of the Blood Angels that's a little bit more violent and vicious, even than the Blood Angels, with kind of like a Gabriel Seth vibes. I think that would be a really, really fun thing to paint. And these miniatures would be really fun to try that scheme out on. You've got regular Intercessors, an Eradicator, an Assault Marine, some guy throwing a grenade. The guy throwing the grenade is particularly fun because the hand throwing the grenade is a robot hand, which kind of really paints a picture in your mind of, did he one time forget to throw the grenade, or he was a little slow throwing that grenade and so he lost the hand? But he hasn't given up grenades. He just got a new hand and is ready to rock and roll. And of course, the aggressor the aggressor pattern guy with the heavy bolter. Heavy bolter and Kill Team for the Space Marines sounds like a lot of fun. I used to take a heavy bolter way back in Kill Team 2018 with my regular squatty Marine force, and it actually did some work. It was one of the very few units in my Kill Team that would actually do some work. I still never won any of my games, but at least the heavy bolter would knock out at least 1 or 2 things a game before it inevitably went down. I really like that Kill Team rules are coming to Space Marine Heroes series because they're really cool miniatures, but there's not a great reason to buy them. They're not super usable in-game unless you just keep buying them over and over and over to get the actual units you want. And they're very monopose models, which means that if you get multiples of the same guy, you're stuck with multiples of the same guy. Although a really fun Kill Team tournament could be, you buy tons of these blind boxes, dump them all into a pile, and everyone has to pull 6, because 6 is a maximum size Kill Team, and then you must play with those miniatures. That could lead to some very, very cool games. Very expensive for a tournament style system, but it would be really, really fun, because Kill Team is a game all about being efficient and getting the absolute most value out of every single miniature you put on the tabletop. So all of a sudden, just having random draws for everything would kind of throw that out the window, and now you're on the back foot. You have to improvise. Actually sounds, ooh, can I make that happen somehow? I have most Kill Teams. I wonder if there'd be a way to just like set up all of my miniatures, and then we all just have to randomly take them. And so all of a sudden you've got a Kill Team made up of like a couple of Poxwalkers and an Eldari Raider and a Space Marine and a Death Guard and Ooh, that actually sounds really interesting. I might have to write some rules for that. And for that, I would also need some terrain. And luckily, our Patreon is full of it. Over there, we have a new STL terrain set every single month. This month, we have the Grimdark Administratum, a full board full of Gothic architecture that can be either pristine or destroyed. We also make one extra episode of Eons of Battle every single week where we take a look at our viewers' miniatures and give some ideas and critiques of how to improve their painting. And we have a tier you can get your name on one of my Black Templar Space Marines and you can join the crusade. I'm definitely gonna try to get my hands on these Kill Team minis. Having an Eradicator in a game of Kill Team sounds like a lot of fun. And really, I should be working on all the other Kill Teams that I have that aren't painted. So I got a lot of work ahead of me. Thanks for watching.